What if I say I'm gonna be 3, 2, 1, 0? What if I say I'm gonna be power scaling and debunking the Bleach verse as a whole? I'm gonna be going through only 3 arcs. They're gonna be the last 3 arcs of Bleach because there's too much story, there's too many scenes, and there's too much stuff in Bleach for me to cover all of them. This video will be way too long. And I know I usually make pretty long videos anyway, but I know a lot of you guys don't want to always sit here and watch hour-long videos because you guys have your own life and you guys have other things you want to do. And I'm pretty sure you guys don't want to sit here and hear me ramble on and on forever. So I'll just be sticking to the 3 last arcs, the Aranka arc, only the final part of that, um, the Fullbring arc, and then the Thousand Year Blood War arc, which is the final arc of the entire series. So I'll be going throughout those, and I'll also be talking about certain points or certain topics in the Bleach discussion when it comes to their power scaling, because there's quite a bit of discourse when it comes from the Bleach side of the fans. A lot of the Bleach fans recently, and this is one of the reasons why I've been wanted to make this video, was because a lot of the Bleach fans have recently been getting pretty cocky. They've been saying that the Bleach verse is one of the most powerful verses in all fiction, that they're stronger than the Dragon Ball characters even at this point, which is ridiculous. They've been stating stuff like they're multiversal, low multiversal, universal at the very least. That's what they're arguing, and at the very most, multiversal or above that. And some of them have been even arguing people like Your Watch, and I'm gonna just call him Your Watch. I know his name is something else. I just can't really. I don't know what it exactly is or pronouncing it because it's a fucking stupid name. So I'm just gonna call him Your Watch. But a lot of people even believe that people like Goku and Vegeta wouldn't be able to beat your watch due to his almighty, and the power scaling in this verse is also pretty high enough to handle it, and a bunch of stuff. So there's a lot of arguments that they use, and I will be covering those arguments, and that's one of the reasons why I made this video, or wanted to make this video, was due to the fact that they have quite a bit of arguments here and there that I want to go into and dissect and see the truth, because there's some misinformation. So this I'll say this before I even get into it fully. I will not debunk everything from Bleach because that's not the whole point of this video. I know I put it in the title, and sometimes when people see debunk, they think that means that you're going to go on to everything and say they're not this powerful, or try to discredit everything that's been argued about them. That isn't the whole point of a debunk. Sometimes debunks just mean that there's certain misinformation that you get from certain fandoms about certain characters or certain things that you have to correct and disprove. So I'm not disproving everything from the Bleachverse or every statement or argument by the Bleach fans, just some of the ones that were incorrect and had the biggest, BSs in. So not everything that they said was wrong. It's just certain things that they said were just not true, or just not exactly as what they were arguing it to be. But before I get into this video, I do want to give a big shout out to a new subscriber by the name of Panda Monk. So big thank you to you for subscribing to this channel. My channel has been weird because sometimes I've been getting some subscribers. I'm like, hell yeah, good. And then sometimes the subscriber count goes down a little. And I think that's just because sometimes YouTube does this bullshit to many different YouTube channels where it unsubscribes people. So if you've been unsubscribed, check it out. If you're not subscribed to me, subscribe back again. If there's any confusion right there. So yeah, let's get into this because there are still some decent amount of stuff that we can cover even with just the 3 arcs. But I'm gonna be going through Aizen and his evolution with the Hogyoku. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it, the Hogyoku. Then the second one, I'm gonna talk about a certain character in the Fullbringer arc, even though in that arc they weren't as powerful in there. But there's a certain character a lot of people use to scale off of. And then the third one, the Thousand Year Blood War arc, had quite a bit of impressive stuff, mainly from Your Watch, who's the main villain in that one. So let's get into it. Now, we first have, we have Aizen explaining how the Hogyoku actually works, because there was quite a bit of misinformation throughout the series of how it worked until we got to this point in the ending. He says, the power of the Hogyoku is to read the minds of those around it and make it manifest what it finds there. So before they thought it was just it gives you the ability to be above shinigamis and hollows, or transcend shinigamis or hollows or whatever. But apparently from Aizen, when he found out when he was absorbing the energy, was that the true power of the Hogyoku and the way it works is whatever your mind wants or desires, it will try to help you manifest that and make it come into reality. That doesn't mean that it can do everything though, because he does explain that a little bit later, but it does mean whatever your desires or wishes are, it can make those wishes come true. But there's still a little bit of a caveat to that wishing system. So after this, he goes on to say the reason Yuriha Kizuki find the Hogyoku's power misidentified. Hogyaku's power as manipulating the boundaries between Hollow and Shinigami is because that was what his wish was as a creator. The reason Kuchiki transferred all of her spiritual power to Kurosaki Ichigo and then lost her powers as a Shinigami was because she hadn't been given a relief from the pain of killing Shibuya Kadi. So there's more they explain the other characters, but basically what he's saying is that when they came into contact with the Hogyoku and these people had their interactions with it, it was able to reach their minds and their desires and wishes and make them come to reality. So for Yuriha, who is the smart guy that was training, Ichigo the entire time. His entire thing that he wanted was to manipulate the boundaries between Hollows and Shinigami, and that's what he got. And then for Rukia, when she was able to transfer her, Soul Reaper powers to Ichigo and then lost them completely, that was also kind of deep down in her desires because she regretted what she did and she wanted somebody else to have the power. So she basically transferred to him in her subconscious. So it could connect to their minds, even being in their vicinity, and make it come true. But he also goes on to say, of course, there is limits to its ability. The Hokyoku's manifestation is what is the minds of those around it, but it still will not happen unless the subject is inherently possesses the power to fulfill their desires. By that token, this could also be called the power that guides people towards their desires. So he himself acknowledges the fact that there is a limit because a lot of people, once when they hear some crazy ability like this or power like this, the assumption is, oh, this means they can do anything, that there's no limit to it. And they always you put a no limit fallacy on that, which is so annoying. But people would argue that, but he clearly himself stated there is a limit. The way it works is it does manifest your desires and the thoughts and minds around people around it, but it doesn't give you fully everything you want unless you have the ability to accomplish that. So a character who's not strong enough to accomplish their goals or their mission or their desires will not be able to achieve it and it will not work for them, but it will try to help you and guide you through that. So it still depends on how powerful the character is or the person is. It doesn't just help out. It can make somebody who's a regular human go into becoming a super god because they wouldn't have the potential or the power to do so. But it will amplify the power significantly enough to the point where they have evolved into a stronger being. But they will never reach that level because they cannot match the desire that they want. So it still has some limitations and boundaries in reality. And then we see later on how much power it gave to Aizen as he's fighting against Ichigo. He says, "You must be surprised because one swing of my sword and the landscape is altered. That is by current power." So this is a little bit of a showcase of his power. As a whole, in general, he basically did a sword swing, and by doing that, he was able to cut off a giant piece of the mountain and destroy the landscape around there, which isn't that impressive compared to other fictional works beats, because destroying a mountain is kind of impressive. It's like nuke levels stuff or high nuke level, but it isn't anything too crazy or too unbelievable, but it is still pretty, I guess, decently impressive to say the least. But right now he's just like a mountain level power. But as he fights him, he flies at Ichigo and he says, "I'll be able to fully test these powers, which transcends both Hollow and Shinigami." And then he goes on as he uses one of his moves. He says, "Full chant Black Coffin brought forth by one who transcends both Hollow and Shinigami. The torrent of gravity is so great that it warps space and time. The likes of you could never even hope to comprehend." Um, but Ichigo was able to break out of it easily. So showcases that even though it has that much gravity that can, pull and bend space time, that Ichigo's power was enough to destroy that and shatter it. And then he goes on to say, by achieving evolution into a dimension separate from Shinigami, both Shinigami and human have become unable to feel my reishi unless I voluntarily lower and level allow them to interfere in the same way that a two-dimensional being is unable to interfere with a third-dimensional being. It cannot be. It cannot be. Does that mean that he is standing in a dimension even higher than I am? I am in. So there's quite a bit of there. After that, we just have his defeat and then him being captured. But let's go through some of the other ones that he mentioned. And this is the big argument that I had here. A lot of people have been using this argument with the whole evolved version of Aizen and the Hokyoku version of him, stating that he transcended this dimension and he's beyond 3D. He's most likely 4D or infinite 4D, making him universal in terms of power and beyond, the universe of space time. So he's transcended beyond that because he said it multiple times. He's transcended. And he even gives an example with the whole two-dimensional being not being able to interact with a three-dimensional being. And since he could do that, and since Ichigo was able to surpass him, that means he would be either 5D or at least infinite 4D, is the arguments go. And I will also talk about a little bit about the Black Coffin and the warping space time thing, but I want to focus on the whole transcending thing. The whole transcending argument, it's kind of annoying because I had quite a bit of debates with people and arguments with Bleach fans that were saying that Aizen already in that arc was universal and 4D because he transcended it. He said he's a transcended being. He's transcended. And he mentioned the fact that he transcended dimensions by giving that example stuff. And my argument was no, he did not transcend the fourth dimension. He did not, I mean, he did transcend the third dimension. He didn't go into the fourth dimension. He did not transcend reality or space or time or whatever you guys want to say he did. And whenever he mentioned the transcendence, he was using it like how people use where they talk about, I transcended this level of power, which we see countless times throughout anime and fiction where characters say, I've transcended this power. That doesn't mean they actually transcended dimensions. They just mean that they've gotten far stronger. It's just, a way to spice up your wording it to, make it sound more impressive. And a lot of people were disagreeing and saying, no, he said that he's a higher dimensional being, and he even mentioned dimensions. But my argument for that was just a comparison between, that was just him trying to, compare their powers between each other and show that I'm better than you. It wasn't a literal thing and that it was just metaphorical. And they're like, no, it wasn't. But you clearly see right here that he doesn't really mention, what he mentions it right here is literally just an example to give to Ichigo, talk about their difference and power, and it's not meant to be literal. He's not literally saying that he's on a higher dimensional plane of existence, because every time when he was mentioning the fact that, that he was, what's they called, that he transcended, he mentioned Shinigami and hollows. He never said he transcended time. He never said he transcended space. He never even said he transcended dimensions. The only time we hear an actual dimensions like that, like 2, 3D or 4D dimensions, is when he's just giving an example of their powers compared to each other. That was it. So for you guys to say that this is proof that he is 4D and they're universal already at this point is complete bullshit, especially seeing as how before this, he destroyed a mountain, or at least the landscape, which was not even a size of a country, and it was supposed to be considered impressive. And he was even saying, and yeah, that was his current power. Then he did get stronger, but there's no way you're going to try to bullshit me and tell me that he went from being able to destroy a mountain, and that's impressive, to all the way to being a universal level being. That's not sensible at all. That's fucking stupid. You can't just evolve a bit and then go from mountain level to universal or 4D. That's just stupid. So a lot of these fans want to make it something more than what it is. And that's one of the reasons why I want to make this video, because I have a big problem with the Bleach fans overtaking things and then bullshitting it and completely manipulating it to fit their narrative. Nothing at any point where he stated throughout the entire fight, throughout that entire final arc with Ichigo, did he mention he transcended the third dimension, that he's the actual transcended being, he's transcended times or concept or anything like that. The only thing he said is he's transcended hollows and Shinigamis, so the power of both hollows and Shinigamis. He's just saying he's above them in terms of power. So it's just basic scale saying I'm way stronger than them. And then when he said he's on a dimension higher than me, he doesn't really mean that. Like, we've seen that even in Dragon Ball, where Frieza, when Frieza was fighting against Goku, Piccolo even stated they're on another dimension above us. There's like this completely different dimension. That didn't mean that they're literally on a completely different dimension. It's a hyperbolic statement. It's just him trying to, because there's more, it's just a very educational way of explaining, differences in powers. It isn't a literal one. And people who are too stupid to understand how words, what words mean and reading in between the lines or understanding metaphors or, hyperbolic statements, they will take these shit literally. No point does he ever say that he's a transcendent being actually. He just uses a transcendent word to say he's above. So he constantly says he transcends hollows and Shinigamis. He never once said that he transcended this dimension, or this reality, or existence, or time, or anything like that. Anything that you can upscale him like that. The only thing that he said is he's above all the other Shinigamis and all the other hollows, that he's transcended them in terms of power. That is it. So I do not want to hear this argument that he was 4D at this point, or they were transcended past, the third dimension, because he said he was transcended being, when he constantly said Shinigami and Hollow. Why would he constantly mention Shinigamis and Hollows transcending them or surpassing them, of he was above the dimensions. He clearly specified what he was transcending, and it had nothing to do with the third dimension or the fourth dimension. He would have just directly said it, since he already referenced the second and the third dimension as an example of the difference between their power, but not a literal difference. And the example wasn't a literal one. It was just like, hey, look, this is how a two-dimensional being would see a third-dimensional being, and this is just kind of how you're seeing me. But then he's like, wait, but you're way stronger than me, so I'm kind of seeing you in this way. And then the black coffin being able to, warp space, time, and gravity. People have also stated that this is a black hole. A black hole. It's not. If it was a black hole, it would have torn apart the entire planet, especially at that size. It would have at least destroyed the entire city within there, right? So if it had that much gravity on the level of a black hole, it would have had more of a devastating effect on the planet and the area they're in. And when people hear like, oh, gravity is bending space-time, technically everything with gravity, which basically anything that has mass that generates gravity or gravity pushes up against them, will bend space-time. Technically, we are also bending space-time as we're existing and moving, because we have a gravitational mass that we exert out because of our surface area and whatever, and our density, right? So we do it too, but just to a smaller extent where it doesn't have really any significant effect. Now, the more dense and the more compact that item is, or the bigger that item is, the more gravitational pressure it will have. So like moons, stars, planets, asteroids, they also have enough gravity to bend space-time to a higher degree. So everything with anything or mass will bend space-time. So that doesn't directly mean anything. A lot of people hear space-time, and that means he's bending space-time. That means he's beyond space-time. He's warping space-time. But technically, having gravity and a mass will warp space-time and gravity as a whole. So it will naturally just do that anyway. So even I'm not saying that it doesn't have a high level of gravity, but that doesn't mean is it equivalent to a black hole. Because every time when people hear that, they assume that, well, if it has high gravity and is bending space and time, that must mean it's a black hole on the gravitational pull of a black hole. But it doesn't need to be as massive or have a strong gravitational pull as a black hole to do that. So yes, it is somewhat impressive, but it does not equate to a black hole, because we can do the same thing just on a far smaller scale. Um, the more gravity you have, the more space-time bends, but you don't need to have black hole levels of gravity to bend space-time in general. So I just want to get that out there. So the whole thing about Eisen, nothing right here shows them on universal levels of power. The most we could see is they're above mountain level, or at least definitely above town level and city level, but mountain level maybe around island level of terms of power, but nothing you can put there that there would be, universal. And then after this, the other thing about him is he stated that he's immortal, and they also do mention, they say, don't get ahead, don't get getting high and mighty because of your immortality. Sorry if I can read some of this stuff. Sometimes my brain goes a little haywire. Also, I'm a little sick right now, so sorry if I sound a little congested. And I'm having a little bit of trouble talking right now because of my congestion. So yeah, but let's get into the next one. So that was the ending of the Ronka arc. And then we get into the Fullbringer arc, where here's where we have the character where a lot of people also off-skill off of him because he has a pretty impressive power. So it goes on to say, this is Yukio's Fullbringer, Invader Must Die. It steals the target away in another dimension, and Yukio can control them with the game screen. So his ability is to create another dimension, trap those that he comes in contact with. So let's say he pulls up on Ichigo, he can trap him within this little dimension, and then he could create it into like a game-like structure and then manipulate it that way. Now, this leads people to believing that this means that he can not only create an entire dimension, but he can also manipulate it however he wants. So he can warp reality, and that he's on a godly level, and that he can warp an entire universe, because people are arguing also that this dimension that he's able to create is the size of the universe, because he was able to recreate their town and even a star and stuff. But there's a little bit to it. And he also goes on and kind of says something like this, but there's a problem with that. He goes on as he fights the ice cap, and he says, you are able to make the walls and room disappear. That is a useful power. Didn't you notice the whole place is my power? I'm like a god here. I'm not sure gods could do anything, for example. So he himself acknowledged that, the ice cap was like, whoa, you can really make, the walls go away and make the room disappear and change things. That's very useful power. And he says, I'm like a god. I can do anything I want here, anything that I like. And a lot of people use that saying, see, that proves it. He can create another dimension, a 4D dimension, or a 3D dimension, put time in there, and the fact that he's able to manipulate means he can manipulate time and space, meaning that he would at least be 4D, that he can manipulate that, and then he can do whatever he wants because he's a god of it. But that's not true. What happens in the fight with the ice captain is the ice captain actually beats him. All he does is freeze his body, and now he's stuck and he can't move while he's still in his own dimension. And then he's like, "Come on, man, let me go." And the ice captain's like, "I'm not gonna let you go unless you let my friends go. So if you want me to let them go, or if you want me to let you go, you have to let them go first." So if he was truly a god of this dimension and this pocket dimension, could do whatever he wants, how the hell was the ice captain able to get him with his move, be fast enough to hit him with his move? And then also his move didn't really kill him or anything. All it did was hold him in place with ice. If he has godlike powers, he could have at least melted the ice or made it disappear or made himself strong enough to break out of it or whatever. But he couldn't do that. So clearly he cannot manipulate the entire dimension. The way it works is it's like a game. So he creates, as the dimension is created, he creates a fake digital world within it, and he can manipulate the digital world to certain extents, like make the room appear, disappear, change the look of the room, change stuff like that. But he cannot affect people directly. He can affect the room to a certain extent, but it's all going to be fake and digital. So this world that you see within it, like the recreation of the city and then the star, those aren't real. Those are digitally rendered, those are just digitally rendered uh, stuff in there, right? It's kind of like when you see characters, they go into like a training room. When you have like a group or a team, they have like their own facility. They have the training room, and the training room creates the digital effects of them fighting on another planet. That doesn't mean they're literally fighting on another planet, or this room is able to create an entire planet. It just creates the visuals that looks like they're on another planet. So that's what he was doing here. So he wasn't really creating a universe. He was just creating a digital or digitally rendering a universe within this small dimension. And the dimension is actually small. If you guys go check it out, it's not that big. It's not bigger than the city itself. So the dimension is clearly not universe size either. And I've talked about this before too when I talked about Dragon Ball character's power and how people mentioned that Vegeta was able to destroy the hyperbolic time chamber, putting this at like universal levels of feat, but that isn't because the hyperbolic time chamber has been stated to be only the size of the planet itself. So it will be technically a pocket dimension. It's still impressive to destroy a dimension with your power or whatever, but that would only scale it to a pocket size on that level. It still matters about the size. Comparing a pocket dimension to a really or like universe sized like space like ours is not the same. Destroying those two things is way different. Size still matters. So it's not just being about it in a different dimension. So there's a problem with that. And it's also important to mention this because we do see something about that later on, as he says, "I can't erase that dimension. It cannot be destroyed from inside. Try to be smarter next time." So he states that he cannot destroy the dimension, cannot erase it. The only and nobody can destroy it, not even from inside. But we see later on Ichigo, as he's fighting against the main villain in this arc, they both end up actually destroying it as he powers up and does his Bankai. This once again leads people to believe that this means that he's universal. See, he was in another dimension. He stated that even the creator couldn't erase it, and the creator has full control over it. So if he couldn't do it, then the fact that Ichigo was able to break out of it, that means that Ichigo has at least 4D power, infinite 4D. But the dimension was not bigger than the city. The whole city and the star that you see in that dimension was digitally rendered, so it was fake and it was not real within it. And then even the guy who stated he was the god of that dimension, he could do whatever, clearly wasn't, because he got taken down in his own dimension and had to comply to the enemy's request because he couldn't get out of it. How would, if he had that level of power and control, how could the ice captain be able to take him down? And why would he just, agree to his demands of getting, taking down the dimension to let out his friends so he can be freed? If he was powerful enough, he could have just broke out of it, right? And it's not like the ice captain is that powerful either. He's pretty decently powerful, but he's not a universal level being. Let's not sit here and pretend that. That's kind of bullshit, right? So the whole dimension, it was a pocket dimension. He doesn't have full control over the dimension, and he's not like a god in there anyway, because we've seen that he can still be taken down. The dimension is small, and even with the whole, breaking out of it and stuff, stating that it's actually a lot bigger than you think, but all the stuff within it was digitally rendered, so it wasn't real. It was like a holograph, right? So them destroying the dimension, it is impressive. They did destroy a dimension, but it doesn't upscale to universal levels because the dimension wasn't the size of an actual universe. and there's no real proof that it is the size of the universe. Is actually a lot smaller. So Ichigo destroying it is nowhere near a universal level feat, and it doesn't mean he was infinite 40 or anything like that. Later on after this, we finally get into the final arc, which is the Thousand-Year Blood War arc, where we get to see the rest of the Soul Reapers fight and the Quincy's and what their abilities are. And there's quite a bit of stuff here. So the first fight we see is Yamato versus Yamamoto. He was versus the evil, not evil, the fake version of your watch. He thought he was fighting against real your watch, but he was fighting against a fake version of him. But he still uses his real power, and he says its heat reaches 1.5 million degrees. You cannot even touch me when I'm using my Bankai. So when Yamamoto, when he unleashes his full power, and his Bankai release was basically, because his power is basically fire and heat. And when he releases it to this full extent, it reaches to heats of 1.5 million degrees to the point where nobody can touch him. And he even states that it would burn him away and the entire Soul Society, meaning that 1.5 million degrees, which is impressive. It's as hot as the sun. It's there's certain layers of the sun that have levels of heat. Rather, the center of the sun is the hottest part of the sun, but it is way hotter than this. It's at around like hundreds of millions of degrees, whereas this is only at like 1.5 million. But it's still impressive. But even with that much amount of heat, it's enough to burn away most of the characters in the Bleachverse. And even somebody who is as strong as Yamamoto cannot handle that level of heat for too long. So it's still impressive. It's a star level feat, but it isn't as impressive, seeing as how people are trying to upscale these characters to universal or low multiversal or multiversal. When you have a 1.5 million degrees of heat is enough to, threaten these guys and burn these guys away. It just doesn't upscale to that level of, power. But it's still pretty impressive. Later on after this, we see one of the most powerful Quincy's. His name is Grimmy, and he has the ability to pretty much warp reality. He can, whatever he imagines, he can create it that way. So he gets into a fight with Kenpachi. He's able to do quite a bit of stuff. He's able to move the earth around. He's able to create water out of nowhere. He's able to form guns. He even makes himself immortal and clones himself. So he has a duplicate version of himself that's also immortal. And he does quite a bit of stuff, but nothing he does against Kenpachi can work until he starts to go a little bit more crazy. He starts to do a little bit more crazier stuff as he drops a giant meteor. As he drops the giant meteor, everybody else is scared. They're like, oh shit, this meteor, if it lands, is going to destroy us all and destroy Soul Society. Is going to kill us all. We can't handle this. But Kenpachi was able to use his power and unleash a little bit more of his power. He didn't go to a full Bankai, but he did, I forgot what's called, Zagetsu or something like that. He does that. As he does that, he's able to destroy the asteroid. And that's very important. I want to talk about that, but I want to get into some of his other feats. As later on, he also is able to create a space, outer space, so he can throw him into there, saying, "Oh, you can cut through anything. I'm gonna put you in outer space, so you can be crushed by that." He says, "Enveloped by space, die." But that doesn't work against somebody like a Kenpachi, as he pretty much breaks out of it. He cuts out of it. And this is also a big argument that a lot of people say that he's able to warp space and stuff. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I do want to go through the rest of the feats that we have here with Grimmy, because it's pretty much getting to the end of it. So I will cover the rest of what happens with Grimmy when he loses, and then talk about Grimmy and Kenpachi's fight as a whole, because that was a pretty impressive fight with the scaling as a whole and everything there. So after that, we go to the end of the fight as Kenpachi basically beats him, and the way he beats him is pretty interesting. So Grimmy acknowledges the fact that Kenpachi is actually really powerful and he's really strong. So he's like, okay, I want to beat you. I need to be as strong as you. So he tries to replicate his power and copy it by imagining it. But as he does this and he tries to attack him, he can't handle it and he ends up getting destroyed. And this ends up beating him, and he's down on the ground. Now, a lot of people argue on how Grimmy lost, and the way he actually lost compared to the way people, especially the Bleach fans, are arguing that he lost, will significantly change the outcome of the fight and how Grimmy's power works and how powerful Grimmy is as a whole. So as he goes on to say, my imagination was correct, even too much. I was able to imagine your total power correctly just there. There's just one thing I couldn't imagine, the fact that your body could stand your power, which is important, that last part, because a lot of people mention that. But after this, he says, what you defeated is not my imagination, but my body. No, it's just an excuse. Even in that case, it still means that my imagination was defeated. Yeah, damn, I wanted to win. As he's completely, getting obliterated and disappearing, he says, yeah, my imagination is reaching its limit too. So that was the end of him and as how he died. And these last three parts were really important to showcase the full extent of Grimmy's powers, because a lot of people saying, well, he has the ability to warp reality. And usually when characters have reality warping, for some reason, fans or people think that characters with reality warping powers means that they have no limit to what they can do. That means they can imagine and do whatever. So they could reach the power to infinite levels, but there would still be a level and limit to it, just like any power, right? You need to gauge how much power they have and to what extent they're able to do it at, right? So even if you have the power to warp reality, is like, to what extent? How much do you have infinite energy reserves to warp reality to infinite amount, or do you have still a limit to your energy reserves to how much you can warp? And is there a limit or ceiling how far you can go? So like you warp reality to a universe size or a multiverse size. So for example, there might be a character that can warp reality, but if they're only universe size, that means that their reality warping will only affect that single universe. So if you're in another universe, in like on a multiverse, they will not be able to affect that other universe, only this universe, unless they go to your universe. But they would only be able to range and manipulate on the scale of a single universe. So they would have to be in each different universe to do it. Or also, they're going to a higher dimension. Let's say they're in the 3D and they're able to warp through that dimension, but they go to a fourth dimension or the fifth dimension and they're trying to warp reality there. They will not be able to, because their reality warping only maxes out to being able to warp a third dimensional uh space, and you can't go up higher than that. So it would also be limited by that. So that's one of the problems with a lot of people when it comes to these guys that warp reality. They assume that they can warp any and all dimensions and every universe and past any reality, but it really matters on what level of power they have. So when it comes to Grimmy, he does have the power to warp reality, but it's not at that level, because he himself stated, my imagination was correct. He was able to 100% accurately depict how powerful Kenpachi was. So he knew exactly how Kenpachi was, how strong he was, and he was able to replicate that. The only problem was that his body couldn't handle it. And this was a lot of the argument that a lot of people use, that no, the only reason Grimmy lost was not because he wasn't able to imagine a stronger body. It was because he got into his own head thinking that Kenpachi is such a monster that the only person that could ever, use that much amount of power, contain that much amount of power, would be him, because his body is just too strong. So he couldn't imagine himself having a stronger body. If he could, he would have had it. So that was the argument that a lot of people use, but that's complete bullshit. In reality, what he's basically saying is that your body is the only one that can handle it, meaning that even when he tried to, compare himself to, or like replicate Kenpachi, he couldn't do it. He just didn't have the power, because Kenpachi was just on a higher level. That's the only reason. But a lot of people like to misconstrue this, especially Bleach fans, to saying, no. Grimmy can warp reality to whatever extent, and he would have beaten Kenpachi. The only reason he lost was because he got into his own head thinking that he couldn't his body couldn't be as tough as, Kenpachi's. That's why he couldn't handle it. But if he didn't have that little hiccup in his fight, and was, had the confidence to believe that he could, then he would have been able to do it. But it was just a confidence issue. Fucking bullshit. It was a limitation to his power. That was the issue. The issue was that no matter how much imagination he had, he does not have the power reserves to create a physical body, because the body that we see is not actually his body. He was just a brain. The body that we see that was created by this brain. But even with that, he could not create a fictional or an imaginary body that was strong enough to handle that energy. He's able to create the energy, but not the physical body, because that's past his limitation. So no, it was not because he got into his own head and that's why he lost. The only reason he lost is because even with his ability to, create things with his imagination, it still has limit. And one of the limits was he was not able to create a physical body strong enough to handle that much energy. So stop with that bullshit. That's a fucking lie. They want to upscale him, but in reality, he was never that powerful. Because he also later on goes on to say that he said that it was body was the failure, but then he said, no, that's just an excuse. So just like the Bleach fans, they were using his bullshit excuse, but even himself, he acknowledged that it was a problem with his imagination. He said, my imagination failed. But a lot of people interpret this as, well, he just couldn't fathom that. But in reality, it was he did not have the power to fathom it. It wasn't that he just psychologically, because the whole argument is that it was a psychological problem, not a power problem, but it was a power problem. He couldn't do it with his power. He couldn't imagine it, not because psychologically he was getting into his own head. That's bullshit. And he even says, my imagination is reaching its limit too. So he himself acknowledges that he has a limit of energy that he can put into his imagination. It's reaching its limit. So it's not like he could have gone beyond that, but he just got into his head and didn't. It was that he physically could not do it because he did not have the energy to do so. So I know it's a little confusing what I'm saying right there, but what Bleach fans are saying is the only reason he lost is he got into his head and said, "Oh, Kenpachi has this much power, but the only person who can handle that much power is him because his body is that powerful." So he tricked himself to believing that only Kenpachi could do it, and then he failed. But in reality, it was even with his imagination, no matter how powerful he tried to imagine his body, he did not have enough energy to match Kenpachi's power body with the power on top of it. It's too much for his body, for his power to handle. His power was getting strained and it was reaching its limit, and it couldn't go past that. So it was more of what I'm saying is it was more of a limit on his powers extent that his power couldn't go past that. Whereas fans are saying that no, it was more of a limit on his psychological process and his thought, thinking of it, which that isn't true at all. That has been completely disproven. But after this, we have your watch fighting against Ichibei. As they fight, Ichibei has a pretty impressive power. His power is a little confusing and it's a little bit hard to understand, but he has the power of like all black and ink and words and stuff like that. So basically, he goes on to explain. He says, "And anything without a name loses its power. A nameless sword, a nameless knight." So basically, his power is to erase names and then write whatever name he wants. So by erasing names, if he throws the black ink on it and whatever it touches, the name of that will be erased or removed to a certain part. Like if he can remove certain letters. By doing that, he's able to take away the power. If he does it like half of the day, he's able to take away half of your power or half of the power of the ability or whatever you're using, right? But if he gets you fully with it, he can take away your powers in general. So you wouldn't be able to use your power. So you wouldn't be able to, whatever technique you have would be taken away. You wouldn't have the energy to fire that off. If you have like super strength, that super strength would be taken away. And then he can write whatever he wants on you. He wrote on him Black Ant. So he was able to take away his power and then uh, change how powerful he was, making him as strong as a Black Ant. So with the ink, the black ink, he's able to either cut your power in half or take away your power completely. And with the white one, he's able to give you how much power he wants to give you so he can make you as weak as possible. But this didn't work because of your watch's almighty. He reversed his ability because your watch has the ability to, see through any possible future and, affect that and negate it. So when that happened to him, he was able to go to another possible future where it didn't happen and basically prevent him from doing it. So it reversed the effects of it. And then he was able to take him down and pretty much technically kill Ichibei by doing so. So Ichibei's power is powerful, but your watch's almighty is way too powerful due to the fact that he can scroll through all these other possible realities, even a reality where where your move didn't hit or didn't work or you didn't do it yet, so he can evade it. So that's how he was able to get out of it. But also Ichibei's power is pretty powerful, though there is a caveat to these powers in Bleach and in power scaling in general, which I will be getting to at the end of the video. So stay tuned for the end of the video as a whole. But there is something within the Bleachverse that kind of limits these certain abilities and powers that even as crazy and broken as they might sound, there's still limitations to it. So after this, he did die, but he got revived as Ichigo is wondering what happened. He says, what happened to you? Weren't you dead? Yeah, I died. All names have powers, and by having you call my name, I have stole your power and put in myself to get back together. So what happened was he died, but Ichigo said Ichibei's name, and he said all names have power. So the names of somebody has something like a name, it will give you your power. And if you take away that name, it takes away their power. So by mentioning Ichibei's name, it gave him the power to come back to life. So he came back to life, but he was able to come back to life using that the power of his name, and taking a little bit of Ichigo's power to revive himself and put himself back together. But he doesn't have enough power to fight Yawatch this time because he was only able to take a little bit back to fix himself. After this, he states something that has been used quite a bit with their power scaling also, to highly upscale these characters in terms of power. As he mentions, if the Soul King dies, the Serite, um, the present world, the Hueco Mundo, and everything will disappear. I'm sorry for asking much of you, but you have to please protect the Soul King. So what was happening was your watch was trying to kill the Soul King, who is basically he rules over not only the Serite, which houses the Soul Society, but it also he's also the reason that the present world, which is just the living, like in Dragon Ball they call it the living world or the real world, and Hueco Mundo, which was like where the Roncars come from. So he's with his existence, it keeps these other universes and these dimensions afloat and working. But without him, once he dies, they disappear and fall apart. Now this leads a lot of people to say, see, they are on universal levels of power because the Soul King himself is able to hold together all these dimensions, all these realities that are universalized. Because the argument is the Serite, the present world, and Hueco Mundo are all universe-sized dimensions. So those are at least three universe-sized dimensions that are kept up by the Soul King and his power, stating that he has the power to hold together these three dimensions, and without him, holding those three dimensions, they will disappear. And you watch, and anybody who is able to kill the Soul King, like somebody like you watch, would be equivalent to his power because if he has the power to hold three whole universe-sized dimensions, then that means his strength should be around those three whole universe-sized dimensions, meaning he was able to be be universal plus to the point of three universes. His power would be equivalent to three universes because he's holding them together. And if you kill him, then that means you're beyond that. So that means you will be beyond three universes. But there's a problem with it, and there's actually a caveat with this that I'll go into. But after this, they go on to explain more. They're saying, but at this rate, the Serite, no, the Soul Society, Hueco Mundo, everything in the present world, everything will be gone. So he also, once again, one of the other characters mentions the fact that not only the Serite will be wiped out, Soul Society, which is housed in the Serite, Hueco Mundo, and the present world, everything will be wiped and eradicated without the Soul King. And like I said, that leads people to believe that the Soul King's power is so massive that he's able to hold together three universes, meaning that he can at least manipulate, control, or destroy three universes. So he's universal or universal plus. And if you are able to kill him, that you are beyond a character who can hold together three universes. But the problem with that is your watch actually explains how the Soul King actually holds these universes together and why he's important, and why if you kill him, that these three dimensions that are universe size would be obliterated. As he goes on to say, the Soul King's sole purpose is to keep the flow of souls in and out of the Soul Society stable. And now that he's no longer here, everything that is linked to the Soul Society, everything Beta in the Soul Society, the Donkey, the Hueco Mundo, everything will fall apart. So what does that pretty much mean? He basically explained that the reason why these dimensions and these universes are, why they're around and why they would be affected and be disappeared if you kill the Soul King is not because he holds these dimensions together or has a power that controls or manipulates it. That's bullshit. What he does is he's the sole purpose to keeping the flow of souls in and out of Soul Society. So the way, and I argued this before, but a lot of the Bleach fans disagreed with me on it, but I'll explain that towards the end of this video also. But what the Bleach fans were trying to make it sound like was Soul King is able to hold these three universes with his raw power, and that's why they're around. And without him, they'll be wiped out. And if you're able to kill somebody who can hold three universes with his raw power, then you would have to be above that, wouldn't you? But that's not how it works. The reason why these universes are around and the reason why he'll be affected without him is because he is able to regulate the flows of souls coming in Soul Society. So it's more like he is a part of the ecosystem, or keeps the ecosystem working to have these universes working properly. And without this ecosystem of souls flowing throughout the Serite and Soul Society, that it will affect all these other dimensions. So it will basically be a domino effect, toppling all them down. It had nothing to do with his raw power or power at all. All it had to do with was his ability to keep the flow of souls coming in, which would keep the ecosystem of these three dimensions working. So it was a balance thing. It was the balance of the universe. Of you get rid of all the hollows in the way the Bleach verse works and all these realities work is through souls, hollows, and shinigamis. If you get rid of any of those things, then it will ruin the ecosystem, it will destroy them, and it will wipe them all out of existence. So if souls are not being regulated, then it will destroy it. If you wipe out all the hollows, which that's what you watch and the rest of the Quincy's were planning to do, was get rid of all of the hollows, and that's why the Shinigamis took her down to the first place, because they acknowledged that, hey, look, if you kill all of these hollows, we need these hollows because as part of the ecosystem. If you wipe them all out, it would technically destroy everything. So you wouldn't have to be having the power to destroy a universe or multiple universes. All you would have to do is disrupt this ecosystem by wiping out one group of people that keeps it up, or stopping the flow of souls, which would do it in itself. So this had nothing to do with power, because if it was power alone, why would you watch go after the Soul King? Why wouldn't he just obliterate all these three universes but with his power alone? Why do this roundabout thing? Why go and do all this when you can easily, with your own power, destroy all these universes, and then recreate it into what you wanted? But he couldn't do that. He needed to kill the Soul King, who is keeping the flow of souls going through. And by killing him and stopping the flow of souls going through, it would disrupt the entire ecosystem, destroying everything. So that's really important. People keep on mentioning the fact, well, it was stated that the Soul King is the sole reason that all these other dimensions that are universe size, I might add, are around, was because of his power. And without him being around and killing him, and it gets rid of that power, and they can't keep it around, right? And if you're able to kill somebody that powerful, then that means you would have to upscale past that, meaning that you're beyond universal levels of power. And that would put him at low multiversal levels. I don't know where they got the multiversal, because be multiversal, you would have to destroy over 1,000 universes or affect over 1,000 universes. This will be well below that. So, and most low multiversal levels of power, but that would only be if the actual case was the fact that, the Soul King, what's the thing called, actually holds these dimensions, or warps, or like, controls these dimensions. All he does is control the flow of souls. So that's very important, and I will talk about a little bit more towards the ending why that's important, because that completely upscales the verse as a whole. So after this, we go on. He explains a little more, saying, and that he is no longer here. Everything that is linked to the Soul Society, everything that's made in the Soul Society, the Donkey, the Wakamudo, and even the present world, will fall apart. Everything, right? So he once again explains even further that the only reason that these dimensions were around and were able to stay around and be stable was due to his existence, and uh, everything was linked to the Soul Society, the flow of souls, and then everything that was made within the Soul Society. So that's how everything was allowed to exist, because the flows of souls going through our Soul Society and the regulation of them kept everything in line and kept the ecosystem working together properly. And they created things within the Soul Society that helped keep and maintain everything within all the other realms. And without him, you can't really do that. So it had nothing to do with his sheer power or the fact that he's a higher dimensional being. It had to do with the fact that he was the sole one who's basically controlling souls coming in. It's all about the souls. That's the thing. It's not really fully about his power or the Soul King, or surpassing the Soul King, or surpassing universes. It's the sole fact about keeping, just trying to keep, what's the thing called, these souls from coming in and out, because without that process, everything will go to shit. So the souls that were important, souls where they're going and where they're coming from, that's what it would really keeps those universes around as a whole. But after this, we have Ichigo fighting as Yawatch. Yawatch is beating the crap out of him, and he starts to reveal more of his power and what he's capable of. He says the Almighty is the power to see the future. It is the power. Is not the power to see the future. It's the power to change it. And then he goes on to say, all I can do is influence and change the entirety of fate that I see in mine. Uh, Ichigo up till now, countless times before you overcame despair, whatever. So what is his power? He has the ability to apparently look through any possibility or reality or future. So usually when some people think about future, they think of it as like linear and they're stagnant, that it only goes one direction. But in the Bleachverse and in some theories, there are many different possibilities that time can go through. It just depends on your actions. So for your watch, unlike other people where they can only see or perceive to see one way that time will go, he's able to perceive all the different possibilities of time that could happen. So if he's fighting against somebody, right, and the person has the chance to kill him one way or another, there's going to be different possibilities. There's going to be possibilities where your watch is able to survive it. There's going to be possibilities where your watch gets the upper hand. There's going to be possibilities where your watch dies or whatever. So he can see all these other timelines and all these other possibilities throughout time on what would happen. But not only can he see them, he can actually change it to his liking. And he says he can influence it and change the entirety of fate that he sees in his see in mind. Meaning whatever he sees, whatever reality he sees that's about him, he can influence whatever reality he's going to be in and change it to his liking to give him the biggest advantage. This is how he's able to win a lot of fights, because even though his opponents are very powerful and have very, very powerful moves, he's able to counteract their moves and their power by simply what's the thing called? By simply seeing the possibilities of what would happen in the fight and then change that to his liking. That's how he was able to beat Ichibei, because Ichibei, even though he got him with his power, he was able to see the other reality where it didn't work and was able to change it into that and then be able to avoid the power and then get rid of it completely. But we also see another pretty impressive power from Ishida. I'm pretty sure that's the name. He uses a power called antithesis. He says, among the two design targets, I can completely reverse anything that has already happened. Take, for instance, for example, I was able to reverse the damage between you and I see such a marvelous power that it might be possible that you turn the power against His Majesty. With such an ability you possess to reverse anything that happened, you might very well be the only person that capable of opposing the Majesty's power. So what Ishida shows is his power. He has a power called antithesis, where it basically means whatever happens to him, he can reverse it on them. So if somebody tries to blow a hole through his chest and he's bleeding out, he can reverse that on them. So now they have a hole through their chest and they're bleeding out, and he's like how they were, where he's completely undamaged. So he's able to reverse stuff, which is pretty powerful. But the enemy he's against also has a certain ability kind of like that, as he is able to fire back at him. He says, I told you, didn't I, have the despair of any misfortune, and any and all misfortune that befalls me is redirected into my forage shield, and which means that the good luck you had that inflicted wounds upon me were wreaked upon you equally magnitudes in misfortune, and then the misfortune that happens to fall upon my body merely gets deflected and absorbed into my forage shield. So Ishida's power, the way it works is, if you attack him, he can reverse it on you and then go back to normal. But the other guy's power, the way it works is, his power is misfortune, where his shield, if he blocks your attacks with his shield, it absorbs whatever damage that was going to hit you and it sends it back onto them. So it basically reflects your own attack against you, but it amplifies the attack that's been reflected, which is your misfortune, and it doubles it up. So he's able to protect himself. So basically, they have pretty much insane powers right there. They both can do those stuff where they can reverse back the powers. His one is just he has a shield that absorbs it and it sends it back twice, whereas Ishida's one just completely sends it back to them and takes it. So it's kind of like a back and forth thing. But after this, they explain a little bit more about Yuachi's powers. They go on to say he can actually rewrite the future. If he can do that, then there's no limit to what he can accomplish. So they also acknowledge the fact that he can rewrite the future. So even if the future goes bad, he can change it to whatever he wants. So he can warp reality and like future and time itself. After this, we have another guy pulling up to help out Ichigo. This guy was actually one of the main villains from the last arc, the Fullbringer arc. He comes back, he helps him out with his power. He says he may have rewritten the future with such an advanced power that you're not capable of rejecting it with yours. But if there is a past where that didn't happen, then you should be able to reject it there. And that's exactly what I inserted in your sword has been not been broken. So as he was fighting against Your Watch was bodying him. He broke his sword, and he was able to, whatever damage Ichigo does to him, or whatever Ichigo did to him, he was able to rewrite it with his almighty and rewrite the future. And this guy acknowledges that he has too much power and he has the ability to rewrite futures, and he couldn't overcome that with his power load. So he gave him, with his power, he basically stabbed him. And by stabbing him with a sword, he can affect time itself also. So what he did was he reverted him to a past before that happened. So before all this stuff happened, he was able to revert it. Kind of like what Orihime does with her power. She doesn't heal, she reverses the effects of stuff. So if they get a damage, she reverses it like before back in time. so she can negate it. But she couldn't do that against your watch because your watch is way more powerful than her. And there's something important about that that I will get into the ending, which kind of changes because a lot of people want to, when they power scale the Bleach verse, they want to say your watch can beat any character from other fictional universes or would have a high chance of winning. But there is a caveat to that, and I'll explain it. And even the Bleach fans agree with this, so it kind of goes against that argument. But he himself acknowledges the fact that his power is immense. Why does that matter? He's saying that technically Ichigo would have been able to reject Yuacha's Almighty if he had enough power, but he has a ton of power that he just can't. So it's not just his ability that gives him the power to beat Ichigo or handle Ichigo, it's also the fact that he has immense power. The immense power really does matter. So after this, we have Ishida's dad, or I think his uncle, pulling up, and he gives him a weapon to help him defeat Yuachi. He says, when an ashwelin is used upon a Quincy, its silver blood clot is created in their heart, and they die. I've collected the very silver and forged their arrowhead from it. Are you the one that should shoot this arrow? So he basically gave him this arrowhead, what it's called an ashwelin, which basically it creates a silver blood clot. So I'm guessing it's made out of silver, and if you hit a Quincy with it, it will create a blood clot within their heart, killing them. So even though your watch is very powerful and he has a crazy ability, he can still be killed like in a regular ways, like a regular human can, where if you have a blood clot or you have a heart attack, you die that way. So this will just directly attack his heart. And they use this against him because after this, when they get Aizen out, Aizen and Ichigo are trying to fight your watch, and Aizen actually tricks your watch a bit as your watch thinks he killed Ichigo as he punches a hole through him, and he thought he killed Ichigo, but what he actually did was he punched a hole through Aizen, because Aizen used his power and ability where he can mess with the senses of a person and warp their senses. So he pretty much warped Yuacha's senses and made him think that he was attacking Ichigo. So even though he has the ability to see through all these futures and alter it, his power, even though he has that power and is very powerful, it can still be manipulated with, like a psychic manipulation, or a senses manipulation at least, because that's what Aizen uses. So Aizen manipulated his senses to trick him. So even though you can see through these futures, you could still manipulate him by using psychic attacks, like putting a psychic image in his head, or you can trick him by messing with his senses. So Aizen messed with the senses, and if somebody has mind powers, they can mess with his mind to trick him into thinking that he's seeing a certain future, but he's not. So he tricked him to seeing Ichigo. He attacked him since he's immortal. He was able to hold him in place and let Ichigo attack him. Ichigo actually does slice him and ends up killing him, but he comes back and says, my power is the power to alter the future itself. I can even rewrite futures, as he goes on to say, in which I have died useless. So what happened was Aizen tricked him by manipulating his senses to believing that he attacked Ichigo, but it was him. And by doing this, it gave Ichigo enough time to come and slash him. He did slash him and kill him, but even when he did that, since your watch has the ability to see through possible futures and manipulate them, he manipulated to where he was brought back, and he stated that even when he dies, he could be brought back to life. Now, this leads people to believe that, whoa, that you can't even just kill him, but he does end up dying. I think for the way to kill him, even with that power, is just to kill him instantly, right? If he has enough time to think or do something about it, even if he dies, he can come back. But if you kill him and obliterate him completely instantly, he can't really activate his power to change anything to come back from death. So technically, yes, he can come back from death, but it's only if you like somewhat partially kill him, or if you instantly kill him or so fast that when you kill him that he can't even perceive what happened, then yeah, he can't just come back to life. But after this, they end up actually hitting him with arrows, saying, I heard Soku, it says, the silver forms as a result of the ashwelin is reformed to its still silver and is mixed in with the blood. The one who activates the ashwelin can, for just an instant, stop his powers. So normally it'll kill other Quincy's, but since he's a lot more powerful, it just stops him instantly, but it does deactivate his power for that instant. And within that instant, they ended up killing him. He says, so what if you managed to stop my powers for just an instant, confirming it? But it did actually matter because that instant gave them enough time to do something. But he's also beaten by another way. there's something else that happens that ends up beating him. As he goes, tries to attack him, he ends up getting cut, and he's like, Zangetsu, I see it. So what I saw at that moment, what a glimpse in the future, I thought it was but a dream, but you were showing me Hashwelleth. So what does this mean right here? Apparently, so what he was saying is that within that instant, even though you guys stop my power instantly, for an instant, that doesn't mean you can take me out right away, because I can still, that instant's going to be up, and I'll be able to see the future, and then I'll be able to change it however. So when he saw the future, he saw Ichigo coming to slash him and cut him up to kill him. And he was like, okay, so if we're going to do it, I'm going to change it. But what happened was that didn't, Ichigo wasn't actually going to attack him. He just thought that Ichigo was attacking him because he saw a glimpse of the future. The reason why he saw a glimpse of the future was because one of his stern ridders, which was this guy who was his right-hand man, he has the ability to share, what's the name? You watch his power. When you watch kill the Soul King and was absorbing the energy of the Soul King, he kind of went into a little hibernation mode. And since he was inactive at that point, he needed to transfer his power to somebody, and he transferred over to him because he's the only stern ritter who could take Yuacha's powers. So he was using Yuacha's power at that time, so they were interconnected. So he also had the ability to see to the future and somewhat affected. So even though he didn't have the full power of that, at this point, he still had the ability to see the future and was still interconnected with Yuach. So at that same exact moment where Yuach was gonna attack Ichigo or see the use his power to see the future and see what Ichigo was gonna do, so he can counteract it with his time reality time altering powers. He was gonna do that. So he did look and he saw the future that was coming at him, but that was a false future that was implemented in his head by literally by his own man. The stern ritter put that in his head to throw his timing off, because he thought that Ichigo was actually coming, so he was gonna change it. But Ichigo wasn't. He didn't even go at him yet. So his timing was off. So he swung and he thought he killed Ichigo because of the future. He saw that it was manipulating his mind. So it threw off his timing. But at that moment, Ichigo didn't move and only moved after he attacked. So before he attacked, he didn't move. He got an image put in his head that he did. He attacked. He got tricked because he put the false image of the future that would have happened but didn't happen yet. So he mistimed it, and at that point when he already attacked, he was open, and then Ichigo went in at that moment where he was open and attacked him and slashed him, ended up killing him. So he can die, and even though he has the ability to come back even from death, he still has to have some level of consciousness left. So if you kill him before he can even perceive it, or if you kill him completely or too fast, he cannot just come back even with his powers. So it still has a limitation there. Now, let's talk about this as a whole, because I know there's still quite a bit of stuff I want to talk about when it comes to this. So when it comes to the whole thing, um, there was quite a bit of stuff we need to cover. And the main big one where I wanted to talk about an ending that I mentioned quite a bit in this video. So the first one about Aizen and the Hogyoku, stating that like the Hogyoku could give you what your heart desires. That is true, but it doesn't mean you can do it to an infinite extent. There is still there's still a limitation on it, and that limitation is due to it depends on the person's power. So just because what's they called? Just because you desire something and you have the Hogyoku does not mean you can accomplish that unless you have the power. So there's a limitation on that due to the person's ability on achieving that desire. Then the most impressive feat we really saw from that arc, physical wise, was destroying a mountain or the landscape. And he himself even acknowledged how powerful it was. The whole argument about Aizen in this arc transcending the third dimension and it being 4D or infinite 4D or universal, whatever, is incorrect, because every time he mentioned transcending, he said both Hollow and Shinigami only. He never once mentioned that he transcended the third dimension. He didn't say he transcended time. He didn't say he transcended space. So that's incorrect. The black coffin is not actually a black hole. It does have gravity that pulls it in kind of like a black hole, but it doesn't have the mass of a black hole. Just because it said it warped space and time, that doesn't mean anything, because anything with gravity and a gravitational pull, which is pretty much everything, warps space and time to a certain extent. Obviously, the more gravity, the more you warp space and time, but the amount of space and time that's warped by a black hole would be far more significant due to the fact that if a black hole was on the Earth, it would have torn everything apart and obliterated it. Whereas this is not pulling everything apart, so doesn't have that high level gravitational pressure on that level. And then the only argument that people had that would put him on a higher dimensional scaling was the fact that he was describing the difference between a two-dimensional being and a third-dimensional being. But that was just showing an example of the difference in their power. It wasn't literal. And whenever he had the chance to say he was on a higher dimension, he never once said or transcended or higher dimension. He never once said actual dimensions like the third dimension or fourth dimension or time or whatever. He only mentioned Shinigami and Hollows. So he only surpassed the power of a Shinigami and a Hollow, and Ichigo with his final Zetsuga Tencho is beyond Aizen, who is beyond Hollows and Shinigamis, but that doesn't really mean anything. That doesn't transcend you to a higher plane of existence or a dimension or beyond universal. And yes, he is immortal, so you cannot kill him. So at least that's there. And then Yukio's power being stated by a lot of fans stating that the fact that since he's able to create a dimension and this dimension is the size of the universe or most likely the size of a universe and he can manipulate it however he wants, that the fact that Ichigo and the other guy broke out of it through using their sheer power, that would mean that they broke out a universe-sized dimension, meaning they would be 4D. And seeing as how they were also able to surpass the power of the guy who created the dimension and can manipulate it however he wants because he's considered to be a god there, that he has the ability to warp and control fully a 4D dimension or a universe as a whole, and they could surpass his power. But there's a lot of problems and caveats with that, with the fact that even though he considered himself a god, he was still beaten by the ice captain, who was nowhere near that powerful, and was simply stuck and frozen in ice. And if he had all this insane power to do whatever he wanted, he could have easily just removed the ice, melted it, or broke out of it, but he didn't. He actually gave up and complied to his demands. And the only thing we really see him doing is changing things within the dimension, like the walls and the rooms, and then giving them health bars and stuff like that. But he can't really manipulate the people, because if he could, he would have been able to defeat them, and that wouldn't be a problem. And that was completely disproven with the Ice Captain as a whole, like I said. Also, the whole stuff that we see in the dimension that people scale up to, saying, see, there's a town here, there's a star, so it must be this big. Those were all digitally rendered, so they're not actual real things in there. So you can't really scale them off of that. And Ichigo breaking out of this dimension is impressive, but the dimension is not even bigger than a city. So it's a pocket dimension, and there's no argument that proves that it's anything bigger than that. And then we see some crazy abilities. We know that, the Yamamoto, who is the captain of the Shinigamis and the Soul Reapers, his Bankai was only 1.5 million degrees, and that was enough to surpass them all in terms of power. And then Gumi was considered the strongest Quincy and the strongest Stern Ritter, but he was still beaten by Kenpachi with power alone. And even though he has the ability to warp reality, that does not mean he can warp it to an infinite extent. Because the most crazy stuff he did was drop a giant meteor and open up space and throw Kenpachi into it. That isn't too crazy. The space thingy, a lot of people make it sound like he created space. No, he didn't. All he did was open up a breach into outer space. That's it. He just literally, it's like opening up a portal into space itself. That doesn't mean anything. That's not really like universal level. He didn't really create a whole universe and then send him out there. That doesn't make any sense. But the whole asteroid thing being taken as a big serious threat is important, because if these characters are, let's say, universal levels of power, right? If they truly are universal levels of power or low multiversal or whatever, why would dropping an asteroid be impressive? I know some people are saying, well, these are weaker characters, but Kenpachi's a really strong character, and he still had to use quite a bit of power to destroy it. And Grimmy was considered one of the strongest Quincy's, or the strongest at that time, right? And he has one of the strongest abilities, but the most impressive thing he could do is drop a giant asteroid, which isn't even planet level, is not even a planet level feat. And even when Kenpachi destroyed it, he was like, you're a monster. He was calling him a monster because he was so surprised and so shocked at how impressive it was. If these guys are universal level of beings, especially if you're saying Ichigo and Aizen were universal all the way back in the Ranka arc, then at this point, even these weaker characters should be way past that. So why is somebody as strong as Grimmy's most impressive feat that he did with reality warping was dropping a giant asteroid? And why was he shocked and was like, oh my gosh, this guy's a monster. He's able to destroy a giant meteor, okay? And we've seen countless other anime characters do that. We've seen it even in One Piece. It's not that impressive. So yeah, destroying a giant meteor, not that crazy, but they took it as a big thing. So clearly most characters cannot survive that asteroid, which not even be planet level. And even at most, you could put it at just planet level. So most of the characters wouldn't even be planet level. And even somebody can like Kenpachi destroying it would be considered impressive. So everybody else, even though characters that outscale him, would not outscale that level of power too much. Because let's be honest, you can go from an asteroid level to universe level or multiple universe levels. Like, just think about it. You're going from planet level to multiple universe levels from a few characters. That's just ridiculous. Uh, and then also the argument that, oh no, the reason Grimmy lost wasn't because his imagination, his power wasn't, infinite and he couldn't do whatever he wanted. It was simply because he got into his own head and just couldn't fathom himself being stronger than Kenpachi. But that wasn't the case. He literally said that he measured it, he accurately predicted how powerful he was. It was just the problem was that he wasn't able to create a physical body strong enough to contain that energy that Kenpachi has, and that his imagination couldn't do it. And he even further confirmed it by saying that, by saying my imagination is reaching its limit too. Basically stating that he has a limit to how much he could use his imagination power and it's not infinite. Uh and then after this, the fight between your watch and Ichibei, there is, like I said, there's something important there. But before I get into that, I do want to mention there's one thing that I didn't put in this one because I just couldn't find it. It was one of the fights with the Squad Zero. They were fighting against the other Stern Ridders, and they all got wiped out. As they got wiped out, one of the leads of them was this one woman who has the ability to she was kind of like a spider lady, and she could sew threads and woven fates and stuff like that, and change fates and stuff like that. Um, she was actually being beaten, and what she did was the Squad Zero, they have this ability where they can transfer all their energy and their power into one of the other Squad Zero member. By doing that, they're able to increase that one Squad Zero member's power astronomically, but the rest are dead. So they were dying, and they said, you know what, we'll just give it to her. So they all gave her power, all their power to her. And by doing so, by her activating the full power by absorbing the rest of the Squad Zero's power, it ended up actually the power she was releasing was actually ended up shaking all the it was shaking up the living universe and Soul Society and the other realms. So this led a lot of people to say, well, see, there's your universal little feat. Her activation of her power by absorbing their power, which would be less than your watch and even possibly Ichibei, was strong enough to shake universe-sized dimensions. And that is a decent argument, but there might be a problem with that. One, due to the fact that we don't see them doing anything universal levels of power, even with the whole, mention of the Soul King, which you guys try to use that as an argument to go off of. That doesn't work because I already disproven that, but I'll get to that again still. But for me, the way I saw it as the reason why the universes were being shook by her power was not because of the immense amount of power, but just because the power's activation as a whole. It probably would have like a connection to these universes, and once when that power is activated, it would automatically shake them anyway. And the reason why I say this is because even while she's fighting and she's releasing more power, we don't see the universes getting shaken or being in any danger. There's no statement again about them being shaken in any danger. The only time we saw the universe getting shooken and affected by it was once when she activated it the first time. When she activated, then it did it. But after that, throughout the entire fight, as she was going, and even with you watching even more powerful characters, they weren't doing having effects on that level and that magnitude. So I just feel like that's the reason why it was just activation. It wasn't the power itself. But going back to it, we know Ichibei's power is the power to control names and stuff. And if you get rid of a name, it reduces the power. It could either cut in half or get rid of it completely. And he can write whatever name he wants, so he can change it completely. And even the names have the power to bring him back to life from even death. But I just want to go through the other points, and then I'll get into the final point I was making. And some of you guys are like, oh, okay, I get what you mean by there. But also the whole thing about the Soul King holding in these three dimensions, which is the Cerete, the present world, and Waco Mundo, which are universe-sized dimensions. Him being able to hold it together means that he had the physical power to hold three universe-sized dimensions. So he would be low multiversal or universal plus. And if you beat him, then you would definitely be low multiversal, right? But the problem with that was the only reason that those dimensions were kept around and kept alive because of Soul King wasn't because of his physical power holding them together. It was due to the fact that without him, there wouldn't be there wouldn't be a proper flow of souls going through the soul society, which keeps the dimensions together, which is an ecosystem and a balanced system that keeps them alive. Without that balance, it would destroy it. So it was not his power that was doing it, his raw power holding the universes or keeping those universes alive. It was him upholding the system of that keeps everything around, which was the souls moving and flowing in and out of soul society and keeping that contained in there. And without him regulating the souls from coming in and out of the living world and Waco Mundo through the soul society and being changed and recreated, that would break down the fundamental laws of nature, and by doing that, it will destroy everything. So Soul King was not really holding them in place. He was just holding the fundamental laws of their nature to keep them intact. And by getting rid of him, it would end up destroying that, ecosystem and getting it destroyed, which is not really a power scaling thing at all. So it doesn't really equate to his power scaling. Uh, and then we also find out the Almighty's real power, which I will be honest, I'll admit here I was wrong. All those other points, I made points saying that this is how it is, this is how it is, because a lot of people say, no, this is how Gumi's powers work, and this is why he lost. Or no, Aizen is beyond 3D and he's a fourth dimensional being and he's a transcendent being, and no the other guy Yuki's power, he could actually manipulate this entire dimension, this universe size. I disagreed with all those points, and I was right on all those disagreements and all those points. But when it comes to the Almighty, I was completely wrong with it because my perception on how the Almighty works was totally wrong, and I'll admit that. And I'll explain what I was wrong about. So what I was wrong about when it came to him was I always assumed that the way his power works is he has the ability to see through different realities and whatever every possible reality. And when he sees through those possible realities, the way he avoids death or being beaten or whatever is he just slips into these different realities. They don't notice that it changed, but he does, and he's able to just slip through those and then go choose the best possible option. And by doing so, he's able to survive. Now, that's important because if that was the case, that would pretty much mean that if he fights against somebody that's stronger than him, that if they're a lot stronger than him, then no matter what possibility or reality there's out there, there'll be no possibility or reality where he wins or survives. So he would not win at all. So if he's against like something like Superman, right? Superman is way above him in terms of power. There's nothing he can do. So even if there's other possibilities, there's no possibilities where he beats Superman. There's only other possibilities where he can survive longer, and that would mean that he would lose no matter what. But that isn't how it works. He actually has the ability to see through all these realities, yes, but he can change it and change what he wants of it. He doesn't just slip into them. So that's a clear-cut difference. And the difference between that and the other one is if he just slips into these other dimensions where he has different or timelines or time, whatever, where he has these different possibilities, he could somewhat evade a little bit the outcome of the ending, but he can't completely escape it. But if he can change it, then he can change the outcome to what he wants, right? So if he's fighting against Superman, he can technically change the outcome, which would give him more of a win advantage. But I still think Superman would beat him, and there's a big problem still with that a lot of the Bleach fans don't acknowledge. But I will sit here and tell you guys that I admitted I was wrong on that aspect, because for quite a while, because I read this story multiple years ago, all the way back in high school, which was forever ago at this point, right? So I read that all the way in high school when this happened, so that's where I remembered, but I was wrong, so I'll admit that. The other points that I made that a lot of Bleach fans were disagreeing with me on, they were wrong on that one. I'm not going to say that I was wrong because I proven myself right already. I showed the evidence. But this one, I will concede and say that I was wrong about his power. That's actually how his power works, which is far more dangerous if you can influence it. Then obviously Ishida and the other guy, they have pretty interesting powers. But yes, he can rewrite the future. But that does not mean that if he rewrites the future, right, that he can do whatever he wants, because if that was the case, he would have won instantly and he wouldn't have died. Also, I don't know how Ishida was able to hit him with the arrow. With his ability to see the future, he should have been able to see that he was going to get hit by that. I don't know how that happened, because it's not like Aizen was using his power to, mess with his perception. And it wasn't like his other Stern Ritter guy messed with his perception and seeing the false future, because he only did that towards the ending. So I don't know how he hit him. So I guess you can still hit him. Maybe if he doesn't see you, then you can do it. But if he does, then yeah, I guess you can see whatever possible future and avoid it. But he wasn't able to avoid that. Um, Also, the fact that they mentioned the stuff about his immense power and stating that he may have he may have rewritten the future with such an immense power that you're not capable of rejecting it with yours. So that was also important. But yeah, he ended up also. Um, it is true that even if he dies, he can rewrite the future and change it where he doesn't die. But that doesn't mean he could do it no matter what, because he did end up dying anyway. It's just that it's in a circumstance where where he's still alive or he's still a little bit conscious, he can activate his power and change it right there and then. But if you were able to sneak attack him or obliterate him once in a but like all at once, then he can't really do that because he would be completely done. So you would have to be way faster and instantly take him out. So there's that big thing. But the big argument I want to talk about, and this doesn't just apply to your watch, it applies to all the characters in Bleach. The way the Bleach power system works and these hacks abilities work is by Reishi, right? Reishi is their energy system, like in Dragon Ball's Ki and Naruto's Chakra, and One Piece is Conqueror's Haki or Haki in general, right? But in Bleach, it's Reishi. So what is the way their powers work is they use Reishi to do these abilities and powers. But if somebody has more Reishi than somebody else, that power and ability would have either less of an effect on them or have no effect on them. So that's important, and we do see this with the fight between Kenpachi versus Grimmy, and some of the people when I was reading when I was reading the manga, I was reading offline, and some people were commenting, and some people were saying, "Hey, why can't Grimmy just just kill him instantly? Why can't he just make his bones into dust? Why can't he do this and that and affect him directly? Do all this stuff? Why is he doing all this roundabout stuff? Why can't he just beat him that way?" And a lot of the Bleach fans were agreeing, stating that, hey, that's not how it works in Bleach. The way it works is if you're going to use an ability or a technique, it can only affect the person if they have less Reishi than you or Reishi that's not much higher than you. But Kenpachi was way more powerful than Grimmy. So no matter, even though Grimmy had the power of, reality warping, he can't directly affect him because he has more Reishi than him. So it negates his ability. So the same thing with your watch. The only reason your watch was able to use his power, and the reason why the guy mentioned having mass amount of power, is the fact that for you to be able to still beat somebody with the Almighty, you would still need a massive amount of power. You can't just use the Almighty on anybody and change the future and reality to whatever you want and beat them with simply just the power alone. You need to have strength on top of it. So if you're a weaker character with this ability against somebody stronger, it's not going to work. So if let's say if your watch was fighting against Ichigo and Ichigo was 10 times more power, had 10 times more power than him, and his ratio was 10 times more powerful than your watch's. Even though your watch would have still been decently powerful and still had the ability of the Almighty seeing throughout all of these possible futures and change it however he wants, he would not be able to affect Ichigo and beat him. Why? Because his Reishi and his power would be way above your watch's, and your watch wouldn't be able to affect him. So yes, this ability is very powerful and OP, but it can be surpassed by just having more power and more Reishi because it will negate the effects of his ability. He can still use his ability, but it just won't affect the person he's using it against. So if he tries to use it where he attacks the guy, it's not going to work. The guy can literally stop it and avoid it. Just like how Grimmy couldn't use his power directly against Kenpachi. He could still use the power, but it wasn't able to directly affect him. And that's why he didn't do it. And even the Bleach fans acknowledge that. Now, that's important because that means that even though your watch is the Almighty is very powerful, that does not mean he can beat everybody and anybody with it. He would still need to have more Reishi than them to do so. Now, some people might argue, well, other fictional universes don't have Reishi, so technically it would still work. And some people say, well, we don't have to do, verse equalization, meaning that all the energy systems and powers are exactly the same because they have different fundamental laws and like the way things work. But I don't even think you need to do that because some universes, Reishi might sound like its own unique thing, but it's pretty much just like life energy or ki, where you could raise up that energy within your body to increase your attacks, have different abilities, increase those powers, increase your strength, speed, and durability. And also you could use that Reishi to draw out from things around the universe, kind of like the Spirit Bomb with the Genki Dama, right? You can do that too. So even if, let's say, since I'm a Dragon Ball fan, and a lot of people, from what I've been seeing, it's a lot of Bleach fans trying to argue with the Dragon Ball fans, saying that actually your watch could beat Goku and he could beat Vegeta, and that even with all their power, he could beat them. The big argument that I've used was that they're too powerful for him to be able to affect him with that ability. And the argument is like, no, 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 he can do it against anybody, but clearly that's not the case. The whole Reishi thing, me having higher level Reishi can negate it, has already proven that it doesn't, you can't just beat anybody, right? But then the argument some people will say would say would be, well, they don't have Reishi, but they have Ki, which is basically like Reishi. It literally increases your power. You can use it, drive from other things. You can increase it to do techniques and to be above somebody. And in Dragon Ball, that's just also how it works, where techniques and abilities, no matter how powerful or unique they are, do not work on an opponent who is stronger than them. So if you have a high level of power compared to somebody, you can negate it. Just like how when Hit could use his time skip, it wouldn't work on Goku when he increased his power. And the only way for Hit to use it on Goku was to increase his power further. But but even with that, he couldn't be somebody like Jiren. So there's still limitations with these manipulation of powers, right? So in Bleach, you can't just use whatever power and beat anybody unless your Reishi is, somewhere around that range. If it's way below, you can't do it. And Dragon Ball is the same way. You can use your abilities or hacks abilities on somebody, and it won't affect them if you aren't around the range of power. If you're way too weak, they don't want to work, right? So if you compare your watch to Goku or Vegeta, he would not be able to beat them. Even if he could see the possibilities and futures and rewrite them, he would not be able to rewrite it in a way where he can beat them at all. They're too powerful for him. The power would actually not work against them. Same thing with Grimmy. If Grimmy was trying to use imagination powers against Goku or Vegeta, it would have no effect on them. He can affect the things around them, but they can handle it clearly. And him, he can change the future, but that does not mean that anybody he fights again, he can change the future into his favor. He can have a better chance of winning, but he can't completely win. So if he's against Superman, Superman's too powerful. There's no future that you can change it in unless you can prove that he has enough power to match Superman's power or be at least in that realm. If you can argue that he's at least in the realm of Superman's power, then you can say that. Or if he has power within the realm of Goku and Vegeta, then he can use it. But if he fights against somebody like Goku and Vegeta, where in their verse, having a lot of power can, combat hacks abilities, meaning that no matter how powerful your hacks ability is, it won't work on them unless you have a certain level of power, right? That's going to be a problem. It won't work on him. So even with the Almighty, it won't have any effect on Goku and Vegeta because they're too powerful and it would just not really, be able to beat them. So there's a problem with that right there. So yeah, it's not an unbeatable move. It is very powerful, but if it's against somebody way more powerful, it can't work against them. And that was the argument that I was using. But a lot of Bleach fans were trying to argue against that. And then Bleach fans were also trying to argue that actually, no, they're not that physically weak either because they're universal. But nothing that they've shown has actually proven that they're universal. The transcendence thing from Aizen, like I said, he only said he transcended the Hollows and the Shinigamis. He never mentioned anything about dimensions, so he's not above the universes. So that doesn't work. One. The other one with Grimmy's, we saw his dimension. It was a small little pocket dimension. It wasn't universe size, so that also doesn't work. The best case you have is the girl who activated power struck those three universes, but also shaking something compared to destroying it is not the same. Goku, when he powers up and shakes the planet, that would not be considered a planet level feat. That would be considered a multi-continental level feat. It will downscale. So if you downscale for three universes, it wouldn't be exactly three universe size. And it's more likely that it was due to the fact that the power is being activated instead of the power itself, or the amount of power she had, because even while she was using her power and the rest of the characters were using their power, they didn't have anything on that level. And especially Grimmy completely goes against this due to the fact that he's one of the strongest Stern Ridders and Quincy's, yet his most impressive thing he could do was drop a meteor, and when it got destroyed, he was completely like shitting himself. Like, what the hell? This guy's a monster. I can't believe this and that. And then the whole Soul King thing being, well, he controls over these three other universe-sized dimensions and holds it together, making it sound like he's holding with his sheer power, is incorrect due to the fact that the only reason that that he's able to do this or keep them around or hold them is due to the fact that he regulates the souls that come in and out of the Soul Society, which keeps the ecosystem working, and without that, it will destroy it. So that's why it got destroyed. So even the argument right there for them destroying the Soul King one hasn't shown anything universal level of power. What he does to keep them around is not a universal level of power. It's not even a really power scaling thing. And then Soul King does not upscale you to that either. So there's nothing in the Bleach verse that has shown these characters to be universal levels of power. The biggest problem that I have with Bleach is they never really make statements. They never say how fast the characters are moving or what they're capable of, or even show it. They just say this character is really fast, that character is really strong, they can destroy it, they have enough power to destroy whatever, but they don't really show to what extent. They don't say they can destroy a star or a moon or a galaxy or show them destroying a star, or moon, or galaxy. So we can't really scale them to that. But people take little minor parts like that and then try to over exaggerate it to make it fit a narrative that they're way more powerful than they are. But it's just not true. So yeah, there's nothing that shows these characters are multiversal, low multiversal, universal plus, or even universal. The most impressive stuff we've seen is Aizen destroying a mountain, a landscape, and Grimmy dropping a meteor that was destroyed by Kenpachi. And then them physically having the power to destroy maybe the Soul Society, which is just the city that's held within the dimension that is the Serite. But that is that impressive either. So there's nothing that showcases these guys on even planet levels of feat. There's nothing you can argue that puts them on planet levels of feat or above that. I would argue that they are on planet levels of feat or above that, but there's nothing that really shows it 100% or above that. So yeah, you can't get them to universal levels of feat. And that matters, like I said, because using the Almighty alone is not going to be enough. So if he's fighting against Goku, using the Almighty is not going to work on Goku because he's way weaker than him. So the only argument you can make for the Almighty to work on Goku is if you are to argue that actually you watch is around the ballpark of Goku's power, but he's not. He's not even universal, and Goku's way beyond universal. So that's why people, the Bleach fans, keep on going with that narrative, but they can't even prove that narrative because there's no real actual argument to it. So no, they are not universal levels, and the only way for the Almighty to work on Goku is to be at least around that power. They themselves acknowledge it in Bleach, and it's something that happens in Dragon Ball. And Ki and Reishi are pretty much the same thing. The only difference is like people with Reishi you can't be seen, I guess, but it's pretty much the same thing. And Goku has a higher level power levels by a lot compared to him, unless you can have actual solid proof that they are universal levels of power, which I already disproven all of them. So yeah, I went through all the feats. I went through all the statements. These were just arguments that a lot of Bleach fans used, and I wanted to go through and see how right they were or how wrong they were or what arguments they had. It wasn't a full on like at first I was thinking of doing just how strong is a Bleach verse or completely power scaling the Bleach verse, but the problem with it is there isn't that many statements or showings that we can actually use as feats to be like, oh, they were able to move this fast, so they're faster than light, or they're able to destroy this much, so they're planet level or universe level or galaxy level. So there wasn't really anything there. There was just certain things. Bleach is one of those shows where it's not much about power. It's more about hacks abilities and techniques and crazy powers, more so than the level of power, So it's kind of hard to do that. So I still power scaled certain aspects of it, but I just couldn't do a regular power scaling. I just had to go through some of the argumentative points, but there's nothing that puts them in universal. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed and stay tuned for next time.